Alrighty, I am live here with Matt Mabe, partner at Arise Homes. Matt, I appreciate you coming on. Let's start with just an overview of your career, kind of where you came from, how you got into the development space, and how you ended up where you are today, and then we'll dive in from there.
That's a long story. I think I could use the whole time, Garrett, talking about the whole story there. But um, grew up in Kansas City, so I'm a Kansas City-based guy. I attended Mid-American Nazarene University out in Olathe, got my business degree. Never worked for anybody else. I've always been self-employed. I was always very entrepreneurial, even as a young guy. And so I was thinking about what made the most sense, and residual income always was the most appealing. And so I wanted to try and get into owning rental properties, but having no experience and not having a family that had been in real estate and development, had to kind of figure out where to get started with all that. So
That's awesome. Okay, so you mentioned there you never wanted to work for anyone. I find it fascinating to figure out, there's some people who feel that way, right? They've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. In your opinion, how much of that do you think is kind of nature versus nurture, right? Like how many people are born as an entrepreneur versus they become one? And kind of, it sounds like you felt like you were born, but what's your thoughts on the nature versus nurture aspect of entrepreneurship?
I was always into, I guess, wanting to do more or less do my own thing. I was not a lover of authority, which probably was very detrimental to me as a young kid. Not that I was a bad kid, but I always just wanted to do my own thing and carve my own path. And so the idea for me of working for somebody else was something that I never necessarily wanted to pursue. Um, but in that, as I think back on that, what I lacked was a lot of organization, systems, processes, all of those things that it really takes to scale a business. So when I say I was into extreme sports, I mean I was the kid at 16 years old. It was jumping off the 40-foot cliff when I was snowboarding when I probably shouldn't have been. And so, jumping first and asking questions later. And so that was kind of more of my MO of operation. And so when I came out of school in the church that I attended when I was in high school, they put out a little pamphlet saying what all the graduating seniors, what they wanted to do. They wanted to go into law enforcement or education or different things. And mine simply said Matt Mabe, entrepreneur, which meant I have no idea what I want to do, but I want to own a business. Neither one of my parents were necessarily entrepreneurial. They were always blue collar workers, and so they had not worked for themselves. But as a young kid, I was out, mowing lawns. I was doing anything I could. I was cleaning people's houses. I was doing anything I could to make a buck, and always working on my own. So when I came out of college, with 4-year degree way back in 1998, when I graduated from college, my friends were getting out making, $40,000, $45,000 a year with good jobs. I was married. I got married at 21. My wife was 19. We've now been married 28 years later with 4 kids. But at that time, my first year out, I made $14,000. My first year out of college, and I was married, trying to figure out how to, keep our head afloat. But I was determined that I wanted to try and make my way and own my own business.
Okay, so let's get into that sort of first deal that you did. Walk me through what that was like, whether it was, just what was the deal, and kind of what was the initial gateway into the real estate development world.
First deal, real estate wise, my wife and I went to a free seminar where they're trying to sell a real estate program. And when we walked in the door, my wife won a free door prize, which was a book. And it was a little thin book, maybe 50 pages long. And we came home and I was so excited. I stayed up till about 4 o'clock in the morning, which probably took me way too long to read it. But I stayed up and I read that book cover to cover. And, I saw how to maybe try and go buy a piece of property. I didn't have any money at the time. Like I said, we had no money.
Right.
And I went out and found a deal where an owner was willing to owner finance a little house over in Independence, Missouri. And so I took that up on an assumable loan. It was $19,000. And I was like, how on earth am I going to make this mortgage payment on $19,000? Because we just bought our first house over in Kansas City, Kansas, just to the west of the plaza in Kansas City. And that house cost us $52,000. Now I'm buying a $19,000 house and I'm not making any money. And so I needed some cash to go renovate that house. So I took my wife's car title and I went down to the bank and I got a car title loan for $2,500. Went and hired some buddies and we scrapped out the whole house, ripped out all the flooring in this house. It was probably an 800 square foot house over in Independence, over near Mount Washington Cemetery. And remodeled that whole thing for under $2,500 because that was the loan that I had. And then I turned around and sold it for about $32,000. So I made about $10,000 on that first deal. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is all the money in the world. And so that was the first deal that I ever
Hmm.
did. It was a fix and flip deal. And then I started from there. Then I bought some other rental properties and kept moving forward.
Hmm, that's amazing. Okay, so that is in terms of kind of getting that first deal in the development world, how important was that owner financing? Because that's something people who are looking online for how do they get into it, that is something that's becoming sort of more and more popular. You did it way back when. Could you talk a little bit more about the importance of owner financing on that first deal? And then what would your advice be for somebody who was in that position? They have no money, they want to get in the game, but they're looking for that
Sure.
first deal.
For me at that time, it was the only way I was going to get my foot in the door because I didn't have any money to do anything with. So I had to find an owner that was willing to finance. The guy had inherited the house from his mom, and so he had sold the house to somebody else that was making payments to him, and he liked getting that monthly check because he liked to make payments on his bass boat. And so
Hmm.
I stepped in, took over the guy that I actually bought it from that had an assumable or a owner finance deal. So I basically assumed an owner finance deal. That other guy needed out of it. He couldn't figure out. He was trying to use it as a rental property, and so
Hmm.
I fixed and flipped it. So that was kind of the first house, and then from there we started buying some other rentals. I started making a few dollars. And then eventually I jumped into my first, land deal. But my first land development deal was only about 2 or 3 years later
Oh,
after that.
wow.
So I went and found a mentor and a partner. But back in the early 2000s, banks were willing to loan on loan to value, not loan to cost. And so I had a deal where I substantially improved the value of a piece of property. It was 80 acres. It was $12,000 an acre for the property. And I figured out how to get sewer and water and get a sanitary lift station. We rezoned it. I got some multifamily, a little piece of commercial zoned onto the property. So that raised the value of that property. Well, it raised it to the value of an appraised price of $18,000 an acre. And so I was able to get 100% financing on the land purchase, and I was 23 years old at the time. And so
Wow.
that was kind of my first step in the door on a deal like that. You don't find deals with lenders today after we went through the '08 downturn, which is probably smart. They want to make sure that people have equity in deals, which makes a whole lot of sense, where it's not just paper equity, but they actually have cash into the deal. So I was able to move forward and start the first development there, and then kind of continue to grow from there. I mean, there's a lot between 2000 and 2025, but that was kind of the first, fix and flip house, and that was our first residential development. Like I said, it was 80 acres that I developed down in the city of Gardner, south of Olathe.
That's amazing. I'm curious how much like, what is your sort of thought process on luck, right? You're just the fact that you're kind of born in this time period where, hey, there's the banks are willing to give more risky loans. You're in this area where you were able to find an owner financing deal. I'm curious just how you kind of look back and think about that in terms of the luck of the timing versus creating your own luck. What are your thoughts on that?
100% blessing and God's provision through the process. And I think no matter where you're at in the market and the market cycles, there's always opportunities. So whether the market's going up, whether it's going down, I mean, there are always ways. I think you have to be creative. I think you have to, always pursue and try and find different ways to orchestrate or pursue deals. So definitely, I would not say it's all based on smarts. I would say, so if you want to say luck, I say blessing, where, like I said, Lord's hand was on me and gave provisions over the years for sure. Made all the difference in the world as far as kind of, on my development and real estate, business side of things.
Right. And at the end of the day, I mean, your willingness to get out there and be so risk forward is what created that opportunity for luck, right? So, yes, the luck is
Yeah, I always say where, whenever you're moving forward, I think you always have to keep moving forward, and I think then that's where opportunity, will strike. So, a lot of times people just sit, they wait, they're paralyzed. So, in some form or fashion, yes, perseverance and tenacity is definitely ingrained in me. Um, a lot of people have they're much more risk averse than what I am. which is good in a lot of ways to be more risk averse. I've learned a lot of good lessons, but I think, as we've continued to grow our business, I've continued to surround myself with people and team members and top executives that can kind of help to balance that out, right? To keep that all in balance. So I think you need, two sides of the coin. You need the entrepreneur, the visionary who's pressing that forward, willing to take those risks. You need those strategic team members that say, well, hold on, let's look at this. How are we going to accomplish this? How are we going to get this done? And so to really grow an organization, so it's not always in mass chaos, it makes a difference to grow something that's actually sustainable long term.
And on that note, are there any early, maybe you call them favorite failures that you had that taught you very important lessons that looking back was like, hey, that was a pretty critical mistake, but what I learned from it ultimately was more valuable. Anything come to mind when I say that?
Oh gosh, I don't know if you have enough time to go over to go over all the mistakes and all the failures and all the things. I think, look, in the marketplace, cash is king. And so I think it can be very dangerous to get too over leveraged. It's super smart to, have a moving toward opportunity and taking risks, but all the meanwhile balancing that out to make sure that you're not getting too over leveraged. And balancing that I think is super important. Also, too, just relationally, making sure. I've come across a lot of people over the years that they'll say one thing, they'll do another, or they try and change the deal at the last minute. And for me, that's hard to go to sleep that way. And it's just not who I am at the core of who I am. It's not how I want to operate. Construction can be a very contentious business as well, where it's always, get it done, crack the whip. There's a lot of roughneck guys in the construction industry. And I'm like, that's just not me either. Like that just doesn't resonate well. So how do we do this differently? And so, with where we're at today with Arise Homes and how we approach things with our team, with our trade partners, with the relationships that we have in the industry, just, transparency, authenticity, trying to love people well, it makes a big difference. So there's definitely things where I am not the same guy that I was, 15, 20 years ago, where I've been able to grow, mature, where the Lord has continued to grow me and who he has me to be.
hmm Okay, let's kind of zoom out a little bit. So now that we've gotten to the point where, okay, we understand how you got here a little bit, let's go back and let's say you're starting from scratch today, right? But you still know everything you know and all the lessons you've learned, but you're starting from scratch. Today's day zero of your world in development. What are kind of the, maybe it's 5 to 6 things, or what does the roadmap look like to go from day zero to that first project, given all that you've learned today?
Hmm. Hmm. Um, Let's see if I can try and answer your question in a nutshell here, because that's a big question.
hmm
Um, I think it's outlining the purpose statement and the mission statement, first and foremost. Why am I getting up every day and doing what am I doing? What's driving and moving me forward? I think that gives a true north. If you can really spend some time and dig deep on what is the mission, what is the purpose. If it's just about the money, or if it's just about growing, or it's just about acquiring material goods, that's all fleeting. And the moths and the rust will destroy that stuff. And so it's like, okay, so what am I working for? Because I think that's going to give, motivation is one thing, to be motivated to go get a deal, make it happen, you get excited, but you need sustainability. And motivation burns like paper, and you need something that burns more like coal, right? Something that's slower burning. And so I think having that, and then setting course a good set of values, behind that. So that purpose statement, that values, what those values are within the organization. And so I think laying some foundational work. I mean, I had to go back and kind of rework that, reverse engineer some of that stuff, where I was just go, 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 go. And I'm like, well, what am I doing this for? And how am I leading people, and how am I leading? So I think that's where I would start. And then if I'm jumping into development deals, I'm thinking, okay, am I trying to do land deals? Am I trying to, build some houses? Am I trying to build a multifamily portfolio? So there's a whole lot of different approaches, and I'm happy to say, hey, here's how I would kind of start. So if you're talking to somebody specific, hey, if somebody wants to get into land development, what do you do? So for land development, I'd say, look, you're going out, you're finding a piece of property. What do you want to do with it? You're getting it under contract. Then you're going through your due diligence process before you ever close on it. Do you want to put houses on it? Do you put multifamily on it, commercial on it? Is there a way to bring that landowner into the deal? Give him him some upside. So if he wants to sell that property for $1 million, well, can I pay him 1.5 million? Can I pay him 1.6 million, but let him share in the profits on the backside? So you're reducing your risk or your capital outlay to do some capital stack there. How are you stacking that? What are you leveraging? Or if you're wanting to go try and get into commercial or multifamily, if you're wanting to fix and flip. So I think there's a handful of different ways to think about that. But, you know, people always get, I think, really excited. What I wouldn't do is I wouldn't go out and raise a bunch of capital. I wouldn't go out and bring in a bunch of outside investors, because you're always going to be a slave to the lender. Whether it's the bank, whether it's private investors, and private investors, they always want to know you're always accountable to somebody. So, we do use bank financing, but we don't work with any outside private investors, in our organization as we grow. And there's plenty of people that say, hey, man, you guys are doing great things. Love what you're doing. Or if you're ever looking for investors, let us know. I'm like, hey, thanks, but no thanks. We can be great friends. Let's go to lunch. Let's have coffee, but not looking for outside capital. I don't want to have that hanging over my head. I can go to bed a whole lot easier at night. So I would think about, how do you work within your own resources, maybe work with, a landowner, property owner, to bring some value to a deal, include them into the upside if you're doing development, because typically in development process, you're raising the value of an asset. So maybe pay them more than what they want, but that's going to lower your risk. So some of those things maybe is how I try and, think about that.
Yeah, that's super, super helpful. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about underwriting. Um, for people who are getting into it, what are kind of let's just keep it to like three things when you're
hmm
evaluating, and we'll specify it for a land deal. What are kind
hmm
of the three things that are, hey, I need to make sure I've got these things in order, to make sure that this underwriting is properly done and I'm good to move forward?
Yep. Luckily, I can say that on my side of my 50% partnership and ownership, I focus on the land development, the entitlement, our sales marketing team. So Austin, my business partner, he works more closely with our controller and all the underwriting, more with our lenders, but I'm involved in the process. I've done it enough over the years. You're going to have to bring some level of equity to the table on how that looks like. So at the end of the day, you're just trying to figure out a return. So what is the return on total cost? And so what's the cost of carrying that? So if you're borrowing money, what's the carry cost? What's the soft cost? And so, are you looking for, what gross return and what net return are you looking for? So for us, when we're, doing land development and houses, we're trying to hit a certain, gross margin and a certain net margin. And if we're not, then we're trying to adjust those scales. We've got 37, 38 employees in-house, as well as we employ a bunch of trade partners, hundreds and hundreds of trade partners, of course. And so, within that, what is our revenue, per head count, for the people. So within the building industry, there's certain healthy numbers there that you need to be looking at, analyzing. What are you spending on, the marketing costs? But so, I mean, we run pretty detailed budgets. But at the end of the day, if you're just looking to do a development deal, let's say you're going to buy a piece of land, entitle it, and sell the lots to builders. Maybe you don't even want to build on it, play that role. You're just saying, okay, the land's costing me X per lot. How many lots can I get on this? Can I get 2 homes per acre, 3 homes per acre, 4 homes per acre? How much can I sell those lots for? What's the infrastructure cost? And I want to make, 30% return on my hard costs. So if my hard costs are $3 million, I want to make 30% on that. Do these numbers work? And then give yourself some contingency numbers in there. So,
Perfect. Okay, so we've kind of walked through underwriting. The next piece is building that team and bringing together the trade partners. And this is kind of super applicable to our audience. Walk me through what it's like from your perspective. When I'm driving down the road and I see one of your guys' development projects and I see all the people that are out there, the natural thought is,
Mhm.
man, that looks like a lot of work managing all of these different partners,
Uh-huh.
timelines,
Sure.
everything like that. Just go through some of the complexities that come with that in terms of bringing together that team, making sure
Mhm.
everyone's working along, sort of towards one goal. How do you do that to the best of your ability?
Yeah, you're right. There's a lot of moving parts that go into that. And so it really takes a great team. And it's our team here at Arise Homes, from, our purchasing team to our building team. Land development's got to make sure that we've got plenty of lots to build on. So within our particular communities, we'll go and we'll develop a piece of land, let's say, 80 acres, for example, take it through the entitlement process with the city, get all the lots put in. Now we're ready to build on it. So now we're getting up to the point where you were talking about, Garrett. Hey, we're ready to build houses on this. So at that point, I've got my purchasing team. They're working on getting all the trade partners lined up, make sure we're within budget with where we want to be. For us, because of the volume that we do, we typically know what we should be paying for different things, whether it's tile, roofing, framing. And so generally, we're inviting trade partners to come and join us at a certain price point. We need them to be profitable. They need to make money. A lot of builders will go out and just put things out to bid. I'm going to go bid this to three framers. I'm going to go do this. We're doing all that work for them. So we say, look, we know that these guys need to make money. We know that they need to be profitable. And so then we're running all those numbers for them.
Hmm.
And then we're inviting them to come into the workforce. We also have phase builders. So you talk about, all the work that's going on. We have a phase one, phase two, and phase three builders on our phases. And so it's not one superintendent start to finish. Those phase builders need to work very, very closely with the trade partners and know those scope of work. We have a 1,500 point checklist. We have very detailed schedules. So we have a team of people that's out there working on that stuff, day in and day out.
It's yeah, it's fascinating when you look at all that comes together, sort of build the world we exist in. I have a question about obviously kind of the audience of this is people who have trades businesses. And so kind of one
Hmm.
angle I wanted to take is, hey, if somebody has a trades business, how do they get into sort of the other side of that where they're not working for somebody like you, but they become someone like you? But on the flip side, what would your advice be to your trade partners? What does it take to be a really good trade partner? And why sort of what are the things that they should be doing to say, hey, I'm going to be the person that Matt wants to work with?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, for us, it's just consistency. And so when we have guys, because of the volume that we have, I mean, guys can show up and work on our houses, at any point. We're starting, two, three homes every single week. And so, the foundation guy can show up every week. The framer can show up every week. I mean, those guys can show up and come to the same place every single day to come to work. So we try and make it easier for them. Like I said, we do POs on everything, so they don't have to invoice us on the checklist. When their work is done and our phase builder checks it off, those guys are going to get checks immediately. We're cutting checks 2 times a week, and we're working to go toward an ACH deposit. We're just depositing money. If they finish on a Tuesday, they get paid on a Tuesday. If they finish on Wednesday, they get paid on Wednesday. We're not dragging guys out 30 days. We're paying every Wednesday and every Friday. And so that way on our checklist, when guys get done, but to be a good trade partner, it's showing up, it's working with that phase builder, making sure that the scope of work is getting done, and then just working it consistently. And so, we want it to be a win-win on both sides of the equation. The trade partners that, don't show up or they have a hard time keeping their staff, they're not leading their team well, those type of things, their employees aren't working well for them. They're not wanting to show up. They're not hiring, quality individuals. And so it's just really hard to keep to a tight schedule because we're running a very tight managed schedule to make sure that we're keeping everything moving forward. So it really is just a matter of, showing up, doing a good job, with quality, with excellence, with consistency, unifying with the team, not creating problems in the field. And we want to be the same way, right? So it's not like we want all this from you. We want to make sure that we're providing and trying to make their lives easier. And that's really the goal. And we preach that around here. Like, how can we make things better for our trade partners? We have trade partner appreciation days. We roll out the food trucks, we have giveaways, we'll go buy $10,000 worth of tools and stuff at Lowe's. We have giveaways and drawings, and we have parties, multiple times a year celebrating our trade partners. We're heading into Christmas and we're going out, we're handing out cash to our trade partners because those guys are just like our employees, man. We want to take care of those guys. They're part of our team. That's why we call them trade partners. We don't call them subs. They're not subcontractors. They're partners of ours. And so, we value them. We want them to value us in that relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic. And I think one thing that I've noticed in having these conversations, because I'll ask that same question to the trade partner directly, right? What does it take to sort of set yourself apart? And I just think it's interesting how 99.9% of the time the answer is the same thing, and it's just doing the simple things right. And
Hmm.
it's you don't have to overcomplicate it in this industry. There's so much value in showing up on time, doing your work and doing it great, having the right tools you need to get the job done. And so it's like this industry is so great because to be spectacular doesn't require you don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? You just have to
Right.
do the job and you have to do it good every time. You mentioned all this work that you're doing for the trade partners. I think it's a good time to get into what you mentioned, which is sort of marketplace ministry. Can you
Hmm.
explain what that means to you, and how you guys try to sort of live that out at Arise?
Yeah, absolutely. So. Arise Homes, the name Arise comes from Isaiah 60, verse 1. Arise and shine, for the glory of the Lord is risen upon you. And so, I grew up in the church, I was around the church, but, came to a personal relationship, with Jesus Christ at a young age. And so I've tried to, my marriage, the raising of my four kids, really live that out where I'm trying to do things in a God honoring way. Now, have I always done that? No. Have I always, followed the practice of, well, what is marketplace ministry? What is that? What does that look like? Look, I wasn't called, well, I'm gonna say, to the mission fields of Africa or another country to go work in, but I was called into entrepreneurship. Like I mentioned that to you earlier, I was called into business. And so, but can I make an impact? Can I make a difference right where I'm at? So it starts, with our employees, with our team. What are we doing? How are we serving? I've got somebody on my staff that's full-time ministry focused, and they're setting up, actually mission trips, vision trips. We've taken the team to Costa Rica in January to go build houses over in Costa Rica with YWAM. We're paying for, their entire family, for employee, their entire families. We have a whole team of people that's going over there, and then we're helping to support the finances of, building the houses there. We're doing work with Habitat for Humanity all the time, and there's a whole list of stuff. And so we actually sit down. We had our meeting actually earlier today, and it's fun to look back at the year and say, hey, here's how much we've been able to give away. Here's how much we're spending. But in addition to that, how are we really loving on our people well? How are we loving on our trade partners well? How are we approaching, our homeowners and our customers? I mean, every house that we close, we have a new home celebration, and we give every family that buys one of our houses, we give them a brand new Bible with their family name or their last name on it, and say, look, it's been a real blessing for us to build this house for you, and we hope that this home is a blessing to you and your family. When I was talking about purpose statement earlier, a mission statement, our purpose statement as Arise Homes is to share Christ and his kingdom and his glory through the work that he has given us to accomplish. That's our purpose. I mean, that's a weird purpose statement for a home building company, right? But I truly believe that we're called to, like, look, we are here to share Christ and his glory and his goodness. And how are we going to do it? We're going to do it through the work he's given us to accomplish. The work he's given us right now is home building and land development. And so, what does that look like? So, when we try and stay focused on that, do we always get it right every day? No. Do we always continue to try and come back around to that and make sure that we're staying on track? Absolutely. And so, when I say marketplace ministry, it's like, how are we loving on our trade partners well, our employees well, our customers? Are we putting and looking through the lens, differently than how the world might approach a situation, and, really slowing down. There was a lot of times in life, Garrett, I would go forward as well. I would make a decision, pick a development, do a deal, and I would get myself in a big old mess. And being a man of faith, I'd pray, I'd say, Lord, golly, I don't know what's going on here, but come rescue me from this situation, Lord. I'm in a mess, and this is a situation, and this whole thing's unraveling on me. And, the Lord just convicted me and said, well, did you ever really ask me if you were supposed to do that deal in the first place? Like, are you really seeking me in all that you do? And so now, I mean, Austin and I, we go out, we walk the property that we're considering, to purchase, and we pray about it in multiple pieces of property. Say, Lord, direct us to the right property. What would you have us to do? Do we need to be still? Do we need to move forward? And so we're just trying to approach things in a whole different way. And I think foundationally, it's who Austin and I were. I mean, the way I met Austin, we've known each other for 30 years. He's my business partner. He was in church youth group. So when I started dating my wife, Jennifer, they were in the same church youth group over in Lee Summit. Austin liked snowboarding. He liked snowboarding, wakeboarding, mountain biking. I mean, all the things that I love to do, all extreme sports. I'm like, oh, we need to be friends. And so we quickly became friends through the love of extreme sports and, snowboarding. And he lived at Lake Lotawana, so we'd go out and go wakeboarding all the time. And he had a mountain bike and I had a mountain bike, and we still do all those same things together as old guys. I mean, I'm 49 years old. So, we're still snowboarding together. We're still mountain biking together, still wakeboarding together. And so, I've known him for a long, long time. So he and I are very much, aligned in how we approach that.
That's fantastic. It's like you can apply the same method to anything, right? Where whether no matter what sort of occupation or business you have, if you're looking for, like we talked about at the beginning, the purpose behind what you do, you can apply this marketplace ministry sort of mindset, and that becomes the purpose, right? The work you do doesn't have to be anything crazy. It can be simple, straightforward, but it's how you do it that can create the value. So I love
Yep.
this. Well, we'll kind of change it up a little bit. I'm curious about sort of some of the trends in the industry. You hear tariffs, you hear costs going up, you hear housing shortage. What are some of the trends that you've been seeing? Maybe some that make it easier, some that make it harder to do your job.
Oh gosh, I mean, it changes like the wind does. I mean, it moves every which way. And so at the end of the day, I mean, my resolve is that the marketplace is not our provider. If I look to the marketplace and, solely, placed all of my hope there and what the market's doing, then I'm going to be super stressed out because real estate changes all the time. Um, in the industry, sure. I mean, lumber prices several years ago, it shot up and it went through the roof. And everybody, I mean, I knew builders that were canceling contracts left and right because, they couldn't afford to build at the prices with the lumber, the way that it shot up. They were changing, homeowners' prices 20, 30, $40,000 on a house. For us, we looked at it and we thought, how do we get creative with this? And so we went to our lumber company and said, hey, if we pre-purchase all this lumber before it all shoots up and we're watching it really closely, can we just store it in your lumber yard? And they're like, sorry, we don't have enough room. Like, we'd love for you guys to buy, $500,000 in lumber for the next houses that you have under contract, but we can't store it all. And we're like, oh, okay, what do we do? So we took, several lots within one of our developments. We graded it all out. We put down a bunch of gravel. We put a fence around it. We put security cameras on it because lumber was like a gold bar laying out there.
Hmm.
And we dropped, three, $400,000 of lumber, and we set it all out there. And we basically set up our own lumber yard. We just prepaid for it. And we had 30, 40 homes under contract. And I mean, we would have absolutely lost money and had a bloodbath if we wouldn't have done that. But we didn't want to raise prices on customers. And every other builder that I knew was either raising prices or canceling contracts. And so it's just trying to be creative in the marketplace. There's always going to be curveballs. As interest rates go down, people can buy, more house with the dollars that they have. So that helps. It drives people to the industry. But when interest rates are high, I mean, we're still not historically high. I mean, let's go back, 15, 20 years ago when, interest rates were up in the high teens. I mean, and people, younger generation doesn't think about that. They think about when interest was at 2.5% on a house, right? But traditionally, we're not at a high interest rate. I love what Dave Ramsey said. He's like, marry the house, date the rate. If you got to pay a higher
Hmm.
interest rate, look, the cost of materials and labor is not coming down. You're never going to win that battle. So, like, lock in with what you can afford. Don't overspend. Don't be foolish about it. And then if you need to refinance in 2 or 3 years when interest rate comes down to the Fed changes that, then do that. So there's always changing trends, in the market, but we are still underserved nationally. That's why you see so many apartments going up. There's still not enough houses that are out there. Affordable housing is always a thing that gets talked about. Cities say they want affordable housing, but they don't necessarily make it easy with the things that they continue to add on year after year and things that drive development cost. Here in Kansas City, the city of Overland Park recently said, hey, we want all cement streets in all of our residential developments. That adds about 15 to $18,000 per house to do cement streets in front of every single one of those houses versus an asphalt street. So those type of things don't help. Those can create, bottlenecks. But there again, like I said, there's always ways to navigate around it. You've just got to be creative and you just can't be stuck in old ways. You've got to be watching, trends and staying astute and being willing to make moves when you need to make moves.
Interesting. I'm curious from the sort of the position you're in when house prices go up and you're trying to sell, that's obviously helpful. But when you're in the position of constantly acquiring land and doing more developments, are you wanting the market to be kind of going up, going down? How do you navigate that? Is and sort of the economics of it all, right? Does that question make sense?
I think so. I mean, it's always going to be moving. So
Right.
supply, demand, I mean, land costs go way, way up depending on what's happening. Land costs come down. I mean, if the market slows and people aren't buying land and there's land sellers that want to sell, they start dropping their price. So it all goes into supply and demand and where the market's at and what's taking place. I don't know that it matters one way or the other. I mean, my
Mm-hmm.
hope is to try and keep costs lower. We are very systematized and organized with what we do. And so we work really, really hard every day to make sure that we're trying to keep our cost and the value of our homes at the absolute best possible rate for the home buyer, for them to get into something that gives them a great value. We're more of a production style builder versus a custom style builder that's building $2-3 million houses. It's very customized. We're very systematized with what we do, so we're able to drive value there. And so I think, look, we're at a price point where there's always going to be demand. It's usually that middle market that usually gets crunched. The high end homes, the custom buyers that have a lot of cash on the sideline that they want, that $2-3 million house. Generally, they've saved up, they have money, they're able to do that. So they're going to still do what they want to do, no matter what the market's doing. Also, to more of the value-based buyer, there's a lot of people out there that want to get out of the apartments. They want to have a home, they want to have a yard, they want to raise a family. And so that's a good market. But you have to have a system and a process to be able to do that to bring a great value. I think it's that middle market of, semi-custom or custom but below the large custom that sometimes gets crunched when things get a little bit tighter. But I mean, things are going to go up, they're going to go down. The market is always changing. You just have to navigate those waters.
Right. Okay, well, this was awesome, Matt. Where can people find you? And then who do you want to find you? Whether it's employees, people looking for homes, trade partners, where can they find you and who do you want to find you?
All the above. You hit on all of it right there. Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, look, we are serving a certain market. All of our homes we're a little bit different for a Kansas City house. We build all ranch plans. We don't build any two stories. We build all single level living. All of our homes are real brick, they're real stone. So from a sustainability, from a maintenance standpoint, our houses are an amazing value. You don't have to, from an insulation standpoint, like I said, when you have a real brick, real 6-inch stone, one level living makes it super easy. So we want those home buyers that we have first time home buyers, we have empty nesters, we have right sizers. And so, we hit all levels of the market. So yeah, we're absolutely looking for homeowners. We are looking for trade partners. We're continuing to grow. We're stacking the deck. As we bring in new communities, we've got new developments all over the Johnson County area specifically right now. And so we're looking for more electricians, more flat workers, more roofers. And so we're looking to stack our bench a little bit deeper. If Patrick Mahomes was the only quarterback they had, you got to have a backup, right? Which of course we did. We found that out here last weekend, unfortunately. But so you always got to have those backup guys, right? You got or the guys that are there working with you in other communities. So we're looking for trade partners, um, and employees. Yeah, we added on a lot of people to our team this last year, and we're continuing to grow. We have open positions today, and so the easiest way to find us is through our website, which is arise homes.com. So arise, the dash line, and then homes, homes.com is the best way to find us. People can go on there, they can make application, they can make inquiries about our houses. Trade partners can find our office numbers, reach out, call over, ask to speak to somebody in the purchasing department. And so that's a great way to get started. So yeah, all of the above. If there's ministry partners out there that are looking for someone to come alongside with their ministry, we're looking to, support other good ministries locally, nationally, and internationally as well. And so, we love the opportunity to walk alongside and help there as well. So
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Matt. Really appreciate it.
yeah, I appreciate you inviting me on. It was good to visit with you today.